Matt, thanks for coming in to see us.
Hi, John. Good to see you.
This is all about focusing on surface fishing. We're at that glorious time of the year now where, the sun has finally come out.
Well, you think about it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I actually had to go floater fishing yesterday.
It's
supposed to be a good day. It was pouring with rain yet again.
So just, looking at that, did you do any good yesterday when it was overcast?
I did manage to catch one, but it was on it's a little lake that's stream fed, and the water was actually freezing cold still.
Just shows.
But we got a few up on the top and managed to sneak one out.
Good.
So,
right, well, we're going to, obviously, today's focus is all about surface fishing, something that I know you love dearly. It's a big passion for you, isn't it, surface fishing?
All through the summer, I'd say probably, spring and summer. It's not the only sort of fishing I do, but it does form probably the major part of my fishing now. It's just so much fun, and it's not to do with that necessarily. That's what I think the best way to go about it is. It's just because I really enjoy it, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, isn't it? At the end of the day, we go fishing to enjoy ourselves, and it's fantastic. I just love it. It's so exciting. Satisfies my hunting instinct as well. You can see what you're going after. You can actually target an individual fish sometimes, and it just gets your heart going. It really is. It's just great fun, a great way to enjoy your fishing, and a great way if you haven't got loads and loads of time. I didn't used to do much floater fishing. I wasn't very good at it for a start. So I used to go off stalking normally when it was hot and sunny. And about, I don't know, a good few years ago now, I was doing a diary piece for, it was carpology. And it got to the end of the month, I hadn't caught anything, and it was like the end of spring time, so most of my waters had shut down, and there was one water that I could go and fish, and it had a reputation as a floater water, and I'd got, I think, 2 days before deadline, and I thought, I haven't got time to go and do a night. I thought I'll just pop down there and do some floater fishing for the day and see if I could catch one. And I had such a good time, and it sort of like rekindled my fire. Yeah, exactly that, and just got me right back into it. And since then, I've just floater fished, pretty much whenever they're on top, and that's what I'll do, is go after them on the surface.
Yeah, because I've actually seen a very well-known angler catch one of the big fish out of a lake in February on a freezing cold easterly wind day, and he caught fish off the top. So
absolutely.
A lot of people Zig Link fishing obviously now is very popular, so I suppose it's just another foot above often and on the water surface, and they will still take them.
Oh yeah, they're certainly in those upper layers. I've not really done it in the winter, but I've certainly into October I've caught them. Yeah. And quite early on in the spring as well. Those first few sunny days, just when the water temperature's just starting to come up, you often see them like cruising about on the top, and they're definitely catchable then, and they're catchable quite a way into the season as well. And even in that time, that real feeding time that we all think of as autumn, you can definitely still catch them off the top then. Yeah. And at night as well. And a lot of people think, just for the daytime of the hot sunny days, and no, not at all. You can catch them at night.
We obviously start these conversations off on whens and wheres do you apply this to your fishing, but let's just say, like say, you're going for a 2 or 3 day session, as you often do. So it's something that you'd always have in your armoury now when you go purely through the time.
I always put the floater kit in there. I'd say always, not through the winter, but certainly through spring, summer, and autumn. Floater kit will be in the car. And it's a little bit extra, but you don't necessarily have to take it out if it's somewhere where you can park securely. You can just leave it in the car, and if the opportunity's there, it's great. But I would say an awful lot of my floater fishing now is done just on a daily basis. So I have tried fishing seriously during the nights, like putting baits out on the bottom at night, reeling in the day, and going off floater fishing. And it's not too bad if your rules allow, but as waters are getting busier, a lot of them are saying that you can't go off, and be out your swim. You can't be out your swim for more than an hour or 2 hours or whatever. So that means you've got to pack up in the morning, go off surface fishing for the day, set back up in the evening, and that can get a little bit wearing. So I've found it's better on balance to just not fish days. Get up early, get down there early. Yeah.
You devote to going for a day surface fishing, or you just
I'll try and string a few days together. So I might say go, and it does depend on travelling time as well. If it's fairly local to you, so I'll get there first light, go early, do the whole day, and then go home at night. Sleep in a proper bed, and then you get up the next day, and it's a whole new day. It's not an extension of your session; it's another trip.
A little bit fresher.
You're fresh. You've got your knowledge from the day before, but you're starting afresh, and you feel feel brand new, and you're up for it again. It's still hard work because you're still doing a lot of hours, especially during the summer. It's light at 4, isn't it? So you're getting up early, getting down there, and and fishing right sometimes into dark.
Yeah, because even it's going to be very productive. Once that witching hour sort of comes along, and the light levels drop, the fish just can't see as much of the line, and that can be obviously very productive time. But let's go back to looking at what kind of kit you carry with you in terms of your setup. So we're looking at things like your rod, your reel, your line, etc. So what sort of kit do you use?
Rod-wise, not what most people would use. I mean, it's traditional, isn't it, to use like a 2 pound, 2.25 pound test cove rod. But nowadays, certainly the sort of waters that I'm fishing, I think most waters as well now, they're just full of weed, and those soft rods just don't really cut it anymore. So I use a 2 3/4 rod, which I still find fairly soft.
Class as a soft rod almost.
It is now, and that used to be a big casting
3.5
rod
or
not
nothing
that long
nowadays.
ago. Yeah,
Sad.
but I'll use a 2 3/4, and it's purely for being able to get fish out of weed and having a little bit of something to get them away from snags. Because I'm not only surface fishing on waters that are packed full of fish. I might do that now and again, go on somewhere quite prolific, but I'm doing it on proper waters for big fish, and there's snags and weed and stuff, and you've got to have something that's going to get those fish out for you. So I do like a 2 3/4 rod.
So like a through action style rod though, or something a little bit
stiffer, reasonably soft,
section.
something that's not good. You've still got a bit of cushioning for delicate hook links and stuff, because you're still fishing quite fine a lot of the time. Any reel really, it doesn't really matter. Tiny little reel or big reel, they'll all do the job. It is handy to have some form of a free spool function on it, really, just so that if you put your rod down, it's not gone, because sometimes you do just get a take out of the blue. But the reel doesn't really matter that much. And main line, something that floats, quite delicate. So what I've been using since we got it in, I think I was the first person to test it when we had it, is the HD floater line. It's absolutely superb, real game changer, because it floats. Yep. And I've never used a line that, we've all used lines that you can float if you treat them with a bit of Vaseline or whatever, but
which was the old way of doing
things. Yeah, you used to have to put like the first few yards, but you can't do your whole spool with it. But this stuff, it actually floats. It's got some sort of hollow core in it. I don't know how technical it is. I don't know that side of it, but all I know is it's a game changer, because one, it doesn't sink, so it can't sink in the margin. Sometimes you get your line close in sinking, and it drags your float out of position and pulls it back towards you, even against the flow, because of the weight of the line pulling it down. Just pulls your float back. Sometimes you've got to mend your line to get it to, you're almost trotting a lot of the time, and sometimes you have to just mend your line, and if it's sunk below the surface, you just can't do that. Well, as soon as you do try and do it, it moves the float, pulls it out of position. And this, you can just lift your rod up like that and just flick your line off the top. I mean, I wish I had that when I was a match angler years ago.
Well, funny enough, that is very popular since we released it with some waggler anglers, because the way that it sits flush on the top when you're striking, obviously the instant contact with the waggler. So
and on a stick float. I would think, like trotting down the stream. Yes, it's totally different to anything I've used, and makes a massive difference.
Now, in terms of breaking strains, that we do a 10, 12 and a 15, and we do a green and a clear. So what is your preferred?
I've used both the green and the clear. I've not really noticed a great deal of difference. I like the green, I mean, I've always thought of surface line as clear line and bottom fishing line as green, but I do really like the green. But I'm not too fussed either way. Whatever I've got on there is fine. I tend to use the £10 for nearly everything. It's pretty strong stuff, and it handles most snags and pads and things like that. However, if I'm fishing in weed with, say, a bit floating crust or something, which is something I do quite a lot, then I'll use the 15.
Okay, so that the 15 maybe sometimes on your main line, but then you won't reduce the breakage strain on your sort of last 4 or 5 foot. You'll go straight through with 15 on that.
Well, main line, I'll use the 15 as my main line, and that would just be straight through to a big size 4 hook. Okay. If I'm crust fishing, in the weed, put it on the surface. Like on the surface of the weed, where you've got backs sticking out. Sometimes you come in, there's a great big weed bed, and you can see the backs sticking out, can't you?
Just sitting
reflecting
there,
off the sun and that. And sometimes a bit of crust there really does do it. So it's nothing like the mixer fishing that I'm normally doing. So for mixer fishing, £10, and for crust fishing, use the 15, and that's straight through just to a big hook. Okay. Whereas when I'm mixer fishing with the £10 line, then I'll use a hook link, which will be different. That'll be a different well, not even the same line.
And you found the 15 in weedy situations is the go-to one for you. Confidence in
for fishing in that heavy weed.
fish.
I'd use the 15, and if I couldn't use that, I'd use like GT80 or a normal mono over other monos. I wouldn't drop down if I'm fishing right in the weed. I wouldn't drop down too fine.
Bait. Very important one. Okay, obviously, dog biscuit is the known method and crust, as you say. But let's just run through a little bit with you about bait. We've got a photo of some bait on there as well, some of what you do with bait in our situations and whatnot. So,
right. I know a lot of people like the tiny little pellets and stuff like that, but when I've used those, I've found that it's just making it too easy for them. It's a bit like using hemp and then trying to get a bite of a boilie over the top. Do you know, all those tiny little bits, and they love feeding on those little things, and I think you just make life easy for the fish. So I do tend to use mixers, which are that little bit bigger. Yeah. And I don't even use expensive ones. I just use the cheapest ones, like those ones.
It's an adult mixer.
Yeah.
That cat biscuit as well. Some people use the cat biscuit.
Yeah, I just don't find the catapult as far. But just cheap mixers. Morrison's, Tesco's do them. I think Asda do, Sainsbury's, all the supermarkets do a cheap mixer. It's important to make sure they float though, because there's one or two. If you go get it wrong and go for the complete food, which look the same, you'll find that half of that sinks, and then you
take on a bit
start
of
putting that out, and all of a sudden you've got fish bubbling underneath your market float, and you're counterproductive. So cheap mixers. You can go for the expensive branded ones. The Chum, they do the job just as well, and you probably don't need to do anything to those, but I prefer a little bit of control over it, so I would rather go for the real cheap ones and then jolly them up myself with my own.
I don't think the fish are going to go, that's a pedigree, that one.
No, they're not going to know that. But I think when you do go for the cheap ones, there's not much in the way of flavour profile or taste to them. So you have got to do something to them.
And what do you do to yours? Okay, for instance, so you're firing out, standard out the bag, unflavoured. But in terms of your hook bait, do you soak your hook bait or?
I don't do a lot to my hook baits, but I do my freebies. I do treat those. I mean, if I was spending the money on the expensive mixers, no, I don't think you need to do anything. But I prefer to have a little bit of control and treat the mixers almost like I would boilies or particles, and prepare them in that sort of a way. So, I'll use a liquid food, something like a Minamino type base like that. That's multi-stim.
Yep.
And an oil, and sometimes I'll even use a flavouring as well. But it would be nice and easy if you just mixed all the three together and just poured them on, but that way you're not really getting the best out of the oil, because it'll all just go into the bait. So what I'll tend to do is put my liquid food, say something like that, and a flavouring, and I'll put a couple of mil of that into the bottle of flavouring. So for a bottle like that size, I might put 10 mil of flavouring in with that. Yeah. And then when I get to the lake, or even before, I'll put some of that on, give them a good old shake up, and let them take that on. And so I'll then put the oil on, but I'll leave it at least half an hour for all that liquid food to get into the bait, because that's there more of as a like a taste profile. Yeah. So I want it to taste nice to them, so they want to come back and eat more. And then when it comes to the oil, I put that on just before I fish, because I want the oil more or less coating the baits rather than going inside.
So do you literally get that bag of mixer you got down there, pour it into a bucket? And what sort of amount do you usually
I'll probably
take
put about 30 mil of like liquid food type flavouring on, and flavouring. Put that in, give it a good shake up.
Like 5 kilo buckets worth, or in terms of the amount. So if anyone's watching, they'll know how much flavour to put on.
It's all going to depend on what you're using for your liquid food and how much flavouring you've got in it, because you don't want to over flavour it. But if it's something you can't overdo, you just put on as much as you want, really. 50 mil for say 10 to 20 mil per kilo.
Yeah, just to get a light coating on.
But it is all going to depend on what you're putting in.
Yeah.
And how much flavour you've got in it, because you don't want it to be too strong. That's going to put them off. But that needs to soak right in, so that wants at least half an hour. Okay. So preferably I'll do that a day before, and then I'll put the oil on just before I'm going to fish. So
and would you leave that for a little while, or is that
you just go straight away then. Okay. And then if I take that same bucket with me the following day, that oil would then have soaked in. So then I'll just refresh the oil, but don't put any more flavour on.
Right.
So just put the oil on top of that then.
Okay.
And pretty much any oil's going to do it. I use hemp seed oil, any fish oil, fossil oil, that sort of thing. Doesn't really matter. If I'm using a fishy flavour, I might use fossil oil. If I'm using a fruity flavour, I might use hemp oil, but I don't really think that makes any difference which oil it is. It's just as long as it's a nice food oil for them that slicks on the surface. And I think that's what that picture is. That just shows what the oil does on the surface and how far that slick covers.
Yeah, so that's that middle area there.
You just got one pouch of bait there, and you can just see that oil just spreads all the way down the lake, and you can imagine fish just downwind of that. It's just coming over them, isn't it? And they're going to sense that. They've got such a good sense of smell. They're going to sense that, and they're going to follow it to the source.
Yeah. Okay. Right, let's talk about the important bit, which is the business end. We've got a couple of pictures to show as well. Obviously, the most important part for you. So let's have a little look at your hook arrangement and how you set all this up.
Right. It's really, really simple. As far as I'm concerned, it's a mobile way of angling. You haven't got a lot of kit with you. You're running around the lake. It's hard work carrying all the stuff, so you want the minimum kit you can carry. So you don't want bells and whistles. You want to do everything quickly. These windows are sometimes small. When your bite time comes along, you might only have like half an hour of bite time in a whole day's fishing. So you want to be able to tie a rig up quickly and get it back out there. So it wants to be, something that hasn't got a shrink tube in and rings and stuff on it. It's got to be quick.
Trying to keep it as light as possible as well.
Yeah. So I use the Zig Link is what I mainly use as a hook link. £10 or £8. Yep. Depends on the situation I'm fishing in, size of fish, and whether we've got weed and stuff like that. The top one that you can see on the picture, that is my go-to rig that I've used for nearly everything. Now, that's a size 10 incisor, which is quite a
straight eye on that as well.
Yeah, it's a straight eye, and it's quite a heavy hook really for the size of it. It's a fairly long shank, but what I think that long shank really does help with hooking them, and it's got the strength to land a fish. Do you know what I mean? It's not a weak hook. A lot of floater fishing hooks these days are very, very thin in the wire, trying to be as light as they possibly can be. And they might not be up to fishing in the sort of conditions I'm fishing in the weed and stuff. So I'd rather use something that I know I can rely on. But also with hook baits nowadays, I know a lot of people are using a mixer as a hook bait, in which case you are going to need a really light hook. But I'm using pop-ups. So I'm using a trimmed down pop-up, and if anything, they're too buoyant these days. Ever since chod rigs came out, every company's made their hook baits, their pop-ups a lot more buoyant.
They use a sphere mix as well. It's they're so buoyant.
Yeah, I mean they've always had those glass bubbles in the mixes, but I suppose it was probably about 8-9 years ago. They up all the bait companies did it. They all upped their game and put more of the glass bubbles in there, which is why the price of pop-ups went up. Yep. To make them more buoyant to hold chod rigs and your hinge rigs up. But for the floater angler, that means that your hook bait can often be too buoyant. So I'd rather use a hook with a slightly thicker wire, so it's a bit heavier, so it helps with the balance of the hook bait. Yeah. So all I do is just a knotless knot. And the only difference really is that hair is doubled back over first. So I'll
almost like you're tying a chod rig on there as well, like that.
Sort of, yeah. I'll put the hook link through the eye and then double it back over and back through the eye again. So I've got a loop on the back of the hook, and I'll tie a knotless knot, 7 or 8 turn knotless knot over the top of that, blob the end. So it gives me like a doubled over hair.
Yeah.
Now what that does is, one, it stops it wrapping around the shank, or I wouldn't say stops it, but it makes it a lot less likely it's going to wrap around the shank, because it's giving it a bit more stiffness. But also it's a bit more robust, so you can often get away with catching 2 or 3 fish on the same hook link without having to retie one. With a single nylon hair, often that's folded back on itself and it's sticking out at an angle like that, and your presentation isn't as good. So you have to retie, but that double hair lasts a little bit longer. So that's the reason for the double hair. If I'm fishing somewhere where I've got to go barbless, then I don't really want a straight point hook. I'd rather use a beat point then. And in those situations, I'll go for
talon tips.
Go for the talon tip. Now, if I'm using a talon tip, I won't use a size 10. I'll go up to a size 8, just because there's not as much metal on the talon tip. It's not as thick in the wire. So to get that same sort of balance, I'll go up to a size 8. But if you just do the same setup with that, you'll find that the line kicks off at a bit of an angle, so you close your gape over a little bit on the hook, because it's got slightly downturned eyes.
Slightly inturned eye.
Yeah, so for that, I'll use a tiny little, I don't know, probably 5mm of silicone tube, and just pop that over the eye, and that just holds the gape.
Just keep the line parallel to the shank.
Yeah, I want it slightly turned in, because you do want to try and maximise the hooking effect. of your hook, because when they're floater fishing, it's not like normal fishing where you're just hooking them all on the bottom lip, is it? It's you get some real random hook holds. So I'll do what I can and just bend it in a tiny bit, but not. It comes off at almost 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And I do find you miss a few if you don't put a little bit of tube in or something just to hold the gape open.
Yeah. I think we've got one more photo as well in terms of so that's your hook holds there.
That's what I mean by like random hook holds. They can be absolutely anywhere.
Oh, anywhere. It's top lips, bottom lips.
Yeah. Don't get many right at the top, but often they're in the side. Sometimes you get them in the bottom, but often in the side. But that also demonstrates how a tiny little size 10 hook can, it's plenty strong enough to land a big old fish. And I know a lot of people aren't confident with small hooks, but they've got plenty of strength in them. Okay,
so now we're going to sort of look into bait applications and the methods. Obviously, we've spoken about how you prepare your baits, but okay, so you've arrived at the lake, you've found a group of fish. Let's just go very quickly through the way you apply a bait to the swim and the methods in which you use.
Yeah, I will spod or spawn bait out if I have to, but I'd much rather feed with a catapult. So if I am spamming bait or spodding it, I'll put a lot out at once, because the last thing I want is to keep crashing a great big spod right on top of fish. So I'd put probably 10 out and then just sit on it and wait for them to come up. But my preferred method is catapult, and that's just a little and often just feeding bits and pieces. That's the catapult. You want something with a real soft, elastic. Yeah, that's really, really soft though. I mean, it's a match fishing product, really, isn't it? Of course, anglers product, but
you've got the hard, and they're ideal for mixers. A little cut.
Yeah, it's perfect. The elastic strength is absolutely spot on for the maximum range you can get with them. And you can't get that far with mixers, but you can get those as far as I can get any. And for anyone who's really anal about it, your maximum range will be from about 10. Okay. Sort of like 9 or 10 mixers will get you the furthest. If you put any more than that in there, you start losing range. Yeah,
slow it
down. And you put fewer in, and they do spread a little bit. So that's your ultimate. But yeah, little catapult like that, and then just keep feeding and try and get them going like that.
Do you do the old school? We used to put it in PVA mesh and maybe put a stone in there, get a little bit further.
Yeah, occasionally I will. Yeah, sometimes, or if I'm trying to get them feeding in weed, sometimes you don't want the bait spread around the weed, so I might put it in a bag with a stone and just try and plop it in a hole in the weed. You're better off actually putting it on your hook then though, and casting clipped up to drop it in the hole.
Yeah.
So yeah, feeding it'll be little and often, and I'll try and keep a stream of mixers going through. You'll often find that, like you'll see the ripple, and I'll try and get on the back of the wind if I can. If there's fish on the back of the wind, it's
funny, isn't it? Some will stick right on that wind line sometimes when you're surface fishing.
Right where the wind meets the flat, that's the place. That's the killing zone to get your bite.
It's crazy, isn't it?
But yeah, a lot of the times you'll be sort of on the back of the wind, or it might be like blowing at 45 degrees, and you're imagining that all your mixers are floating down, following that ripple. And then you'll see fish taking over there, and it doesn't always follow, because that's the way the ripple's going. That's the way your bait's going to drift. So it's important to keep an eye on where it is actually going to, because you're thinking they're going down there, and that might be in front of somebody else, but really all your bait's gone over that way. So you've got to keep an eye on where your mixers are actually ending up, and it might not be where your float goes. And the other one that you do get quite a lot is you're putting mixers out, and suddenly you hear, where's that from? and it's right under your feet. So even though the wind should be taking your mixers away, sometimes you get that little bit of slack, and the water eddies round, and it's brought some mixers in under your feet. And it can be feeding right down there.
Okay, so here's one for you, and probably the same for everyone watching this. Bloody seagulls, and how do you get around seagulls?
Yeah, I get a lot of people saying, how do you do it at Seagulls? A lot of my fishing is on the south coast.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely rampant down there. It's right.
And it's not just seagulls. I mean, it's every other feathered friend.
Yeah.
On the lake seems to think, get free dinner.
There's not a great deal you can do about swans other than feeding them off
with a loaf of bread. It's an old trick.
Yeah, but even so, the swans. I found the best thing to do if you're getting pestered by swans is just leave your kit and just go for a walk around the lake, and they're normally gone by the time you get back. There's one secret to seagulls, and that's just use a gull line, basically a spod rod with a 3-ounce, 4-ounce lead on the end, and braid. And you can't use it everywhere. You can't. You can use it in open water. You can use it in open water, providing there's nobody opposite, or it's not going to mess anybody else's fishing up. If you've got an island, that's absolutely perfect, or a far bank that you can cast to. You cast over there, tighten up and get your line high up over the trees and just leave it over the top of a tree, so you've got a line going out in the water. And gulls just don't like it for some reason. I don't know whether they think they're going to get tangled in it or what it is, but they won't go near it most of the time.
No washing line method, isn't it?
Yeah, and you just leave that up there and fish underneath it. Then now and again they'll build up enough courage, and particularly a couple of younger gulls might come in and drop down and start feeding. And you just pick it up and move it about, and they see it and they don't. But it can be quite useful, because sometimes you can use the gulls to your advantage. You might have been feeding, for a couple of hours, and you've ended up with bait spread all over the swim. The fish are sort of spreading themselves out a little bit. Sometimes you can just drop your gull line down, or reel it in, or whatever. Let them come in and clear it up, and then you can just tighten it back up. Then you start again, like on a fresh, clean swim.
Yeah, okay.
So that can be quite useful, but that really does make a big difference.
Right, so you've arrived in your swim. You put a bit of bait out there. You've got them going. When do you cast? Is it or do you put the hook bait out first, then cast over the top? I mean, what is your approach in terms of when to cast?
Depends on where I'm fishing, sort of lake that I'm fishing, situation.
We've got some pictures here actually sort of show that scenario.
Right, yeah.
Actually.
I mean, that's the classic, isn't it? Build them up into a frenzy.
Yeah.
And if I'm on somewhere that's got plenty of fish in it, well-stocked lake, and they're up for it, then that's what I'll do. I'll just keep them build their confidence, get them going, and then cast out. But it's not always the case that you can do that. If you're fishing somewhere with fewer fish in it, you're unlikely to get that situation, or it might not be very often. Windows are very small a lot of the time, like we mentioned with gulls and swans and ducks and what have you. 1 minute it can be there ripe, and the next minute it's all gone and ruined. A couple of swans come in there and it's done, and your window's gone. Other times you just have to realise that is as good as it's going to get. You've got maybe 3 fish feeding, and there aren't any more turning up, and it's not going to get any better than that. And they're not. They can take them or leave them. They'll have the odd one, and they're not going to take any more. And sometimes you just got to say, well, that's as good as it's going to get. I'm going to cast out. So although the ideal scenario is to wait until you've got that sort of situation going on, in effect, it's rarely like that, and often I'll cast out a lot earlier than that, just to make the most of the opportunity that's there. And sometimes I'll even fish a single.
Yes, a good method.
Yeah, especially if you can see a group of fish, they might come out a wee bit or just cruising through. If you can land probably within 5 rod lengths of them, but no less than 2. I want to be at least 2 rod lengths away. If you can land your controller there, you'll often get an inquiry straight away, and sometimes they'll even turn around. Even if you land behind them, they'll turn around, go and investigate that splash, and just bang.
Just again, like putting a little sweetie over the top of their head, and it's just out of curiosity.
I think it is. I think it's the splash. They see the splash. Oh, what's that? And they go and have a look, and then they've got to test it. And those ones never get away with it. You nail those every single time. For some reason.
Right. The other annoying thing, I think we've all suffered here. You're sitting there. You've got your hook bait in the middle. There's food all around it. They're taking every single one.
They don't take
your one. I mean, so annoying.
Happens all the time, doesn't it? And there's a few things that you can try and do just to try and elicit a bite from them. Sometimes it is just down to those light levels, though. Sometimes it's just a case of they can see what's going on. They know something's wrong, and they can sense it. And they can probably see something's not quite the same. I think it's very similar to like how a matchman fishes. When you used to fish with a single maggot, trotting a single maggot down the stream, you on a 2 pound hook link, not a bite. Go down to a pound and a half or 1 pound hook link, and suddenly you start getting bites. And I don't think it's so much that they can see it. I think it's the way it behaves. It's just not behaving quite like a freebie. So the things I'll try and make sure that I've got right is that the rate of... It's a lot of the time it's like trying. It's very rare that you actually put your controller out and it just stays out there until you get a bite. A lot of the time it's just drifting through the swim slowly. So you've got to try and make sure that your float and your hook bait is going through one at the same speed as all your freebies. It's not going through any quicker, not going through slower. So if there's anything dragging it back, like too much line on the surface, or a slack bit in front of you that might be dragging it back and making it go through slower, that can stop you getting bites. If you're going through too fast, or if it's not going exactly the same direction, if your mixers are floating that way and your hook bait, just because there's a bit of drag on it, is going like diagonally across like that, you're just not getting a bite. It's got to appear like the freebies and got to behave like them. Now, you can't necessarily do that all the way through its like entirety of its trot, but you need to like establish where the kill zone is, where they're taking the mixers, and then make sure you've got your line all fully mended just before it approaches that bit, and so that you've got the best possible chance of getting a bite in that area that they're taking the baits. Other things I'll try different colour hook baits, and that can be just, most of the time I'll use like a cell hook bait, which is very much the same colour as my mixers, but just now and again a yellow or a white or a red, any colour. Just try changing different things, just to get a bite. Length of hair can make a difference sometimes. Sometimes you need to go short, sometimes you need to go longer, and I've never worked out which way to go necessarily for any given situation. I think we all start
short to the shank normally, don't we?
I normally have it fairly short. I don't want it absolutely tight. I do want a little bit of movement there, because I just do think that helps with the hooking. But yeah, sometimes making it a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter. And the main one, I think, is the balance of your hook bait. I think if you can imagine, again, with the same thing with the single maggot on the pound hook link. If you can imagine that they're sucking at the freebies, and each one they take, they don't, especially as they're taken on water, it doesn't take a lot. The occasional mixer sinks of its own accord. They sit very low in the water. It doesn't take a lot for them to suck down. But if your hook bait is too buoyant, it's
not acting like the others.
It's not quite the same, and they'll approach it, and you'll get a boil. You'll get a boil where they've tried to take it, and they've realised something's wrong right at that last second. It's not gone in or whatever, and it's a big boil on the surface, and you think you've hooked one, and you haven't, and your float doesn't even move. So I do think it's really important to get that balance exactly right. So what I'll do, the standard hook bait it's like a 15mm hook bait. Now I'll chop that in half, and then I'll trim the sides and get it down so it's probably even a little bit smaller than a mixer, but not far off that sort of size, and then test it in the edge. And I want it so
because they swell a little bit as well once it goes.
Your freebies do, yeah. So my hook bait is actually probably a little bit smaller than those, and test it in the edge. So I'll lift the hook bait up and drop it, and if it just hits the surface and stays there, it's way too buoyant. You want it so it drops down into the water and then comes back up. You don't want it critically balanced, because then as soon as your hook bait's taken on a bit of water, then it's going to start sinking. But it does want to be balanced so that it doesn't take, almost like a critically balanced hook bait, but in reverse.
Yeah.
So when you're normally fishing on the bottom and you want a hook bait that sinks really, really slowly, this you want so it floats really slowly. So the opposite way around.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take much suck from a fish for it to go in.
Right. Okay. So now the next one is, where do you strike? Some people will go off when the fish has taken the hook bait. Some people, I personally wait for the movement on the float before I strike. Yeah, so where do you strike?
I'll always wait for the float to go first, just purely because you get those boils on you.
Yeah, because we've got a few images as well.
I think we have.
Show, and this one is very important.
That's something that does happen a lot. And if you're up close like that, you can see what's happening there. There's a fish come up. He's come up underneath the line, and straight after that, it just boiled off. Now, if that's out in the lake, you think you've had a take and a bought a take there, or you've got a take. But a lot of the time, I think they're doing that, or coming up underneath your hook link. Just taking a mixer that's nearby. So I'd rather not strike in those circumstances. I'd rather just leave it and just wait for the float to go.
Because they often attack the controller float as well.
An awful lot, yeah.
A hell of a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if
they try and take it, but you try putting a 20mm boilie on the hook bait and they won't touch it.
I mean, are they doing that to investigate, to see if it is an alien object in the lake?
I just think they're trying to eat it. They're in a surface feeding mood, and they're just trying to eat it. I'm pretty sure. Actually, it was one time I was surface fishing on a little lake. It was a poaching lake at the time. Or free fishing lake, should we say?
And
I'd put my last controller up a tree, and I thought, what am I going to do here? I thought, what have I got in my bag that floats? And the only thing I could find that floated were pop-ups. So I ended up making my own controller out of 2 pop-ups on a lead insert, and that worked. But they kept on taking the pop-up, kept on trying to take the controller. But it's anything that floats will do it.
Yeah,
but I don't know why they take the controllers. I mean, that controller there is probably 30mm across, and they're always trying to eat it.
I mean, he's having to go up the line, that one. Look,
He's just come out. He's just had a mixer. I think he's just had a mixer. That's,
right,
that's
going to nudge your
yeah.
line there because we've got another 2 images on here. Actually, what's the next one?
Yeah,
on here?
so
So
that's what I was talking about a second ago. Where you get one that's just turned away at the last second, or he's tried to suck it, and I'm pretty sure most of the time that's it's either he'd come up under the hook link, but most of the time I think it's just that hook bait's just a little bit too buoyant. Okay. So you just need to trim a little bit off your hook.
Do you think sometimes as well they just nudge the hook bait? I think personally they do. They'll just come up and knock it with their mouth just to see how it reacts.
I think I'm not sure. I mean, where that's happened and where I do get it an awful lot. It's a lake that's stuffed full of fish. That is, there's loads and loads in there, and I don't think they're that cute. But it's amazing how many times they just get away with it and just boil away at the last second. I don't know. I'm sure it's because it's not the hook bait doesn't quite behave the same as a freebie does when they approach it. They just give it a very gentle suck, and if it doesn't go in, I think they know something's wrong and they panic.
Because they haven't got hands. This one, they've got no hands.
No, all they can do is try it. And I think I'm sure that it's just that little bit more buoyant, and they've gone to approach it, and it's not right, and they panic on it. But in that situation, if float hasn't gone, I don't want to be striking there because all I'm going to do is put more and more of them on edge. So
you're almost looking for
I'll wait for the float to go. Yeah,
drag and move, and that's when you go. So I think we've got another picture here as well.
That's when I strike. That's a take. The float's gone. You can see this little bit at the front there. That's the float just gone under, and that's a proper take. And that one's panicked. That's
hooked.
Yeah.
Okay. And there you go. Look,
that's just a picture of when you do get that balance right on the hook bait. That's the sort of hook culture you can get.
Quite way back that one as well. He confidently took that one as well, wasn't he? Yeah. So interesting. Right, now we've got some, as we always do, some pictures of some of your favourite fish. Not so much favourite, but fish that have got stories behind them that you've caught on floaters. Okay, so we've got sort of four photos of some lovely carp here and a lovely mirror there. So let's just run through the scenario, shall we say, when you caught this one.
Yeah, that one, that's in there sort of to illustrate that, how productive floater fishing can be. That was on a lake where there's not been a fish out for 48 hours, and nobody else floater fishing. Everyone's just fishing on the bottom, blanking, hot weather in summer. And I think I had 5 that day. 5 and lost a couple as well. So
everyone else is behind motionless rods.
Yeah, exactly. Just show if it's not happening, do something about it. And floater fishing is a real active way of fishing, and it's not always the most productive way, but sometimes it can be the way to get a bite.
Well, it can be the difference between blanking and catching. And again, that's what I say. It's well worth always taking that floater rod with you, as we all do. And
Definitely.
We've got another one on here as well.
That one, that's a real old fish, that is.
It's got some mouth. Look at the size of the mouth of the fish.
Yeah, it's been caught a few times over the years. Now, that's a situation when we were talking about light levels and how that, when just that
witching
last
hour just
light
comes
day,
in.
Yeah, just, you can be doing everything you possibly can. I'd got fish feeding and I'd had them feeding for hours and they just wouldn't take the hook bait. And it was one of those situations where, nothing was particularly wrong. You're just waiting for that window of opportunity when the light level was right, and then just probably 10 minutes before, 20 minutes before dark, something like that. It was just as that, when you just think
sun
it's
goes
starting to
behind
get
the
dark.
trees
Yeah,
a
it's
bit,
just gone down and it's just starting to get dark. And you can sometimes I've fished and I've had like nothing all day long, and you've had fish feeding all day and not a single take, and then in half an hour you can have like 3 or 4 bites.
And like well worth a day beyond motionless rods, and that can just happen. So we got another one as well. Another old mirror there. Look.
Yeah, that's a 35. That one. That was caught probably 6 foot out from the edge.
So it's not always about.
No, it's not always about like fishing out in the pond for them, and it was mixer fishing. It was still done mixer fishing, but it was right under my feet. That one.
Was that a lowered bait for you there without floats, or was it a bit of crust?
No, that was mixers. That was
mixers.
Yeah, that was just caught on mixers, just standard mixer fishing, sort of like pulling them 20 yards out, and they've
drifted.
I said before about you hear this as they've just drifted round, and although the wind's taking them but like blowing away, some of the mixers have just found their way round and just like eddied round right underneath your feet.
And there you go, underneath your feet. And we got another one on there also.
That one's in there to illustrate really that it's it's not just a small fish method. That's it's not the biggest fish in the lake, but it's one of the bigger ones in there.
You fell
and that
victim
was
to a float.
yeah, that was on one of those sustained
Small mouth,
Sesh-
that fish as well.
Yeah, it's got a tiny little mouth. That was on one of those weeks where I'm going, like, you know, I'd gone 3 days on the trot. I'd gone the first day and seen fish up the end of the lake, and I'd gone up there, and sort of within half an hour of me starting up there, I'd seen him drift down and got further down the lake and further down. And the next day, I think it was on the second day of the week, I got there a little bit earlier and sort of got to where I knew they were going to be before they'd moved out. So they were basically going up one end for the night and then moving out in the day, following the sun down the lake. Yeah, so
you were sitting there waiting for them.
That day I got there earlier because I knew they were going to be up there, and I got there earlier. Yeah, pretty much waited for them to turn up. Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Just one thing we haven't touched on. I think every angler has probably caught on a crust, a lovely bit of crust. You know, my first surface fish was caught when I was young, and you know, it was match rod and all that. Yeah, mate, look, put that hook on, a bit of crust on it, and what I said. Do you still fish like that these days, or is it all?
Yeah, I do. If it's weeding. If I'm fishing in proper weed,
setup in that, it was straight through like what we all done onto the hook, weight of the bread, and flicking it into, you know, amongst
just put it in a hole in the weed, and maybe, you know, put it in there and strike it off so you've got a few bits out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, and people don't really do that nowadays, do they? It's the old-fashioned method. But yeah, it's great.
So
dip
just
your bread in a
quickly,
bit of water.
Because again, please, anyone watching this, it's still a cracking method of fishing on the top. Something I still try to do these days. What size hook would you use if you're going straight through on your line? Bigger hook, obviously.
Yeah. Well, if I'm using crust like that, I'll be using a big bit of crust. So size 4, 6, something like that.
Because you're almost covering the hook and you're just trying to expose the point a little bit.
Yeah, and probably the more hook you've got there, the more there is for that bread to hold on to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and there's, you know, if I'm doing that, it's likely to be in weed. If I'm fishing open water, I'll be fishing mixers, so everything's fine then. But if I'm fishing a static bit of bread in the weed, the bigger the better, really. It just gives yourself more chance of getting them out.
Lovely way of fishing. Well, look, Matt, thanks for coming in. It's been another very good podcast with you. Hopefully everybody will get out now and do a bit of surface fishing and learn from what you've told us. So
if the sun comes out,
if the sun comes out, it's gone blooming cold recently. But look, thanks for coming, mate.
It's a pleasure.
We'll catch up with you soon. You look after yourself.